So we're going to do a lateral raise exercise for the deltoids, and a lot of times they say specifically the medial deltoid, but it's going to be just about the bulk of the whole thing. Now, we're going to do it a little differently because not only is it seated, but we're going to put the straps up around the forearms. And this really does help a lot. It changes the forces on your shoulder a lot, and it feels pretty good, but you just got to do a couple things. Get that handle out of the way so the webbing's up on top of your forearm, and also keep it clear up by your elbow. Don't let your arm start to straighten out and let this thing slide down, because then it changes everything. Keep bent enough that it stays up here, right up in the bend. Okay, that's very important. Pay attention to that the whole time. You're going to keep this bent. So now you're really just driving your elbows, not so much your hands, but your elbows out to the side. And this really is a great sensation. It's very, very different than having the weight in your hands and putting extra forces on your shoulder. So give this a try. You can see, once again, everything working here, middle deltoids, anterior deltoids, rear deltoids, and even rotator cuff muscles down inside. This is their primary job, is to make your shoulder function in this little manner right here. So take a look at that. Keep your posture up nice and straight. Josh could, if he wanted to, scoot up away from the back pad. That would change things a little bit. He could even lean forward a little bit if he wanted to, keeping his back in a nice, smooth, flat alignment. And that again changes the muscular contributions a little bit. In other words, it's changing who's participating just by changing the angle and his body's relationship to the resistance in the rope. So there's a couple great options, but the big thing is keep your posture, keep it nice and smooth, and keep that elbow bent so your resistance stays right up here. This is a seated overhead press, and you've got a couple pretty neat options with your Revolution. The one in the manual shows the freedom arms all the way down and using the handle directly attached to them, pushing up at an angle. And that's a great version. But this one's kind of neat too, utilizing these pulleys that sometimes we don't take full advantage of down here on the ground. So take a look. Josh has scooted himself way out forward, so he's over these front pulleys. You can't do this resting back here. So this could almost be considered a little different variation in that he's got a lot more control required of him when he was leaning back against the pad using the previous configuration I was talking about. It's a little easier for him. He doesn't have to control as much with his backrest. But anyway, go ahead and bring those pulleys, or sorry, handles up in position so the rope is coming across the front of the arm. And then just press right up overhead. And again, you can see that the direction he's pressing, that position relative to the pulleys, is incredibly important. If he was too far back, these ropes would be pulling at a totally different angle. Now he's got a couple options here too. He's doing a wide version of a press right now, but he might be able to kind of bring his arms a little bit more towards the front and kind of push forward. There you go. So he can push forward into the center a little bit. A couple great options. You're going to need to check your resistance, because each time you change the plane or direction you're pushing through, it's going to feel different. You're using different muscles, the joint's different. You're going to need to check for the resistance that's appropriate for each version of each exercise. Very important. This is the shoulder shrug, primarily trapezius muscles, traps. These guys that peek up over your backside here by your shoulder blades. You can kind of see them from the front, but these are really on the backside of your body. And they're pretty vast, big fan-shaped muscles. You're mostly addressing the upper portions of those that do the lifting or elevation of the scapula or the shoulder blades. So, in order to resist an upward motion, we need resistance from below. So we're using the pulleys that are down there near the ground. And we're using the front ones. We've got the handles attached. And I might even have Josh to scoot back just a little bit so that the front of the pulley is just near the ball of his foot. Now, there's a couple things about these. You see people in the gym doing shrugs all the time. You see them doing things like circles. You know what I'm talking about? Where they do these big circles and things. Those motions like that may be fun, but they're not really resisted. You've got downward resistance, so only the upward motion is going to be challenged here. So you might as well just resign yourself to going straight up. And now here's the other thing you hear in the gym, kind of a myth. They say shrug towards your ears. But the thing is, your ears are actually a little bit forward of your shoulder. These muscles attach on the back of your head. So it would be much more direct if you would create the intention, the idea in your head of driving your shoulders towards the back of your head. Now in the process of doing that, sometimes you'll see people throw their chin forward. So they're like this. Yeah, they'll do that. Or they'll throw their chin up. We don't want either one of those. You want to keep a perfect posture here, and this is very important because as these muscles lift your shoulder blades, they're also pulling on your cervical spine. So the alignment or the position of your neck is really important with this exercise. So another thing that you'll see people do, they'll put on so much weight that they really can't go up towards the head, and they end up just kind of moving the shoulder blades in towards the base of the neck, kind of like right there. And that's, there's nothing wrong with that. But to get all the way up and take advantage of all the development of this musculature all the way up to the head is what we're really looking for. So keep the weight appropriate to allow this full motion and keep all those little tips in mind, and you'll be surprised how much you can get out of this. Another final tip, pay close attention not only to the lifting, the concentric part, but pay close attention to what you could call the relaxation part. So on the way down, go really slow and really let this muscle relax, because sometimes this area is filled with tension. This is not a bad exercise just to help with the relaxation. Do not, however, when you go near the bottom, don't start slouching. This is not more stretch on this muscle. So keep your chest up and keep your posture. Just let those shoulder blades go down all the way. And I think you'll find some great options here if you take a look at all that stuff and create some great sensations and even relaxation through this strengthening exercise. This is an exercise that's typically called a rear delt row, meaning you're going to do a rowing motion with your elbows bending, and we've added something to it. We're crossing over, and it's from a higher pulley position. So crossover high rear delt row. That's this big long name. It's really much simpler to do than it is to say, to tell you the truth. Just take the handles and cross the ropes. So that you've got, left side, right hand, vice versa. And then you're going to need to lean back just a little bit because we need this chest kind of facing up towards the pulleys. Now it'd be better, Josh is very flexible back here and he can do it by leaning or by bending in the low back, but you could also do it by keeping your low back a little straighter and just leaning your whole body back almost like you were water skiing or something. That's very comfortable for a lot of people right there. Now the motion itself, it's really important to keep the elbows out away from the sides. So you've got about 90 degrees or 80 degrees between your arm and your body here, and that's the plane you want to move through. Notice as Josh comes back to the front, he also moves his hands to the center, and then he spreads his hands apart, following the elbows motion straight back at about shoulder height. So it's again a triangular motion, kind of the opposite of a press, whereas the elbows go wide, the hands spread out just a little bit. The forearms are pretty much staying in line with the cables the whole time. Now, that's going to be the tough part, keeping your body where you want it, not moving everything around, and keeping the plane of motion. So choose a weight that really allows you to do it correctly. You can always go up in weight later, but practice the proper motion first. This is the standing overhead press, and one of the keys is taking a look at the position of the freedom arms, because if you go too low with the arms, then there's a chance that you won't be able to extend all the way up overhead because the rope will bottom out. So you're going to need to adjust them up just enough to allow you to reach all the way overhead. I think we've got that about right for Krista. Let's check right here. Notice how we've got the hand grip adjusted, which D-ring we're using, and she's going to press both hands straight up and kind of over her forehead. Now a lot of you may not have the same shoulder range. You may not be able to get all the way up as high, and you may have to come more forward. Show them what that would look like, Krista. And if you have to come more like that because of the way your shoulder functions, then that's fine. But if you can go a little more overhead like a traditional overhead press, that's kind of what we're looking for here. And you want to scoot back like Krista is near the machine so the cable stays pretty in line with your arm. Show them what happens if you take a step forward, but then go straight up. See how that cable's pulling way back on her arm? That is not what we want. If you were to step that far forward, you would also have to move at an angle consistent with the rope. Yep, something like that. So, stepping back overhead. Another variation that I think Krista loves is the alternating one, right? It's her favorite thing in the whole world. So there's an alternating overhead press. There's a bilateral, symmetrical overhead press. Both of them are great exercises. Just make sure you keep control of all of this stuff when you're reaching overhead. Don't throw your head forward, strain your neck, things like that. Use good control. There's a couple little variations on external rotation of the shoulder that I'd like to show you. Some people call these rotator cuff exercises, but it's really much more than that. First of all, I've got the arm set on number 3, and that's just about shoulder height. And I think this is the one we show you in the manual where Krista's going to Just try to keep the upper arm relatively steady and pivoting around a point as if there was a nail going through her arm here, right? And she's rotating backwards. Now the thing that this does is creates the easiest position here and the hardest position when you're fully rotated at the top. And a lot of people might not be able to do that. So let me show you another variation. It's amazing how much difference it makes when you change the angle of the resistance. So if I put this down, maybe closer to 6. Let's try 6. Now, she's still going to start about the same way, but when she gets up to the top, the angle of the resistance drops off. In other words, when she's up here, it's not pulling straight out anymore. That actually makes it easier. So this is a nice little change or variation. Can you feel the difference? Mm-hmm. And many times it's more comfortable on people's shoulders. You can also make that change by, I'm going to have you turn towards the camera just a little bit. She could bring this down towards her side and have her arm really near her side, or if I drop this down even lower, now go ahead and abduct a little bit. There we go. She could hold it in this position and do rotation. So the idea is that the windshield wiper-like plane that her forearm is making, the cable needs to always be in that same plane. And so as we change that arm over there, the rope needs to stay relative to the same plane of movement. And there are a lot of options here. Every single time you change the freedom arm, you're going to change the effects on the rotation. So experiment and really kind of analyze what you're doing before you just take off on one of these exercises. This is kind of the opposite of a chest fly, so sometimes people call it the reverse fly. It's mostly a rear delt exercise, and it's more than that, to tell you the truth. It's all these shoulder blade muscles and all this kind of stuff. But the big thing is you're starting in a standing position with kind of a staggered stance with your feet, kind of a lunge position. It'll help you stay more stable. Cross the handles over, so you got opposite hands to opposite sides, and the freedom arms are about shoulder height. Now Josh is keeping his elbow locked in a single position, not all the way straight, but with a slight bend in it, and then he simply brings those arms straight out to the side at shoulder height, keeping that plane of shoulder height the whole time. Now you notice he's moving the shoulder blades all at the same time. You can see all this stuff working, and there is a lot of rear delt work, but goodness, you can see everything else too. So you can see what we're trying to address here with this exercise. One thing you might watch is your spinal position. So tighten your abs. Josh, I'm going to have you take some of this arch out of your low back just a little bit. There you go. So if your back starts to feel funny or something, pay attention. Sometimes it's because you haven't really watched what you're doing down here in your core area. But the rest of it's pretty simple, and you don't need to worry about trying to go too far back. Just go back as far as these muscles will take you. Don't swing it, throw it, or anything else. Don't bob around in the torso like you're trying to, yank on the thing. Just make the muscles do the work, and you'll get the results you want. This scapular retraction exercise, or kind of a backward shrug, is really not advanced in so much as what's going on in the shoulder blades. It's the position you're going to be in. That's what's going to make it advanced. We've got the freedom arms all the way down, position number 9. Now in order to have resistance against retraction, you can't be standing up straight. So watch what Josh does. He bends at the hips, keeping his back pretty flat. You've got to practice that first. This is really the toughest part of the deal, because so many times people can't keep the proper posture and alignment when they're doing this, and they get all rounded. So until you can achieve this and hold it the whole time, in order to keep a perpendicular alignment between the rope and the torso, we can't even do the exercise, okay? So when you can achieve this and bend over and stay there, and then only move the shoulder blades. See how he's pulling straight back? His arms are being pulled straight forward in line with the rope. So they are in essence extensions of the rope. So he's not trying to pull like a row. He's not pulling with his arms. They're just straight and hanging there. Everything that's working is between his shoulder blades right here, and you can kind of see that happening. So it's not a big motion. And if you try to turn it into a big motion, you're going to end up using other things. Again, you're going to start bending here, or you're going to start bending here. And that's not the point. Big, flying around stuff, that's not what we're looking for here. It's slow, it's controlled. And as he goes to really show him this eccentric part, Josh, as he goes to the negative and lets his shoulder blades go forward, he can get a tremendous stretch in these muscles without losing his posture. That's where the advanced part comes in. That's the tough part, is that kind of control. Now, why would we do this? Well, a lot of people want to, quote unquote, fill in the muscles back here. Bodybuilders like the idea of having thicker upper back. But to tell you the truth, these are important postural muscles. Every one of us that's out there that's walking around with rounded, slouched shoulders. These are the guys right here. So this is worth taking a look at, but you got to do it right. The traditional exercise known as the front raise is also known as shoulder flexion. And we're going to do that in the standing position right here. You can do it, and I think it shows in the manual, using the cables or ropes from the front pulley down here on the floor. We're going to do a variation using the freedom arms adjusted almost all the way down. We're at position number 8, which is just a little bit out to the side and down at the bottom. Now, we're going to use the handles with the longer adjustment to them and simply raise straight forward as far as we can. This is a great exercise to do alternating. I would probably suggest alternating from the very beginning. And the reason for that is if someone starts moving to the front with both hands, that's double the resistance trying to pull them backwards or downward in the trunk. So start out one at a time so it's less to stabilize here. And then if you're not having much trouble with that, you could try both later. But the idea is to reach as far forward as you can. And that can be progressive. If in the beginning you can only move this far because maybe you've had surgery or some bursitis or some doctor has told you just don't do that kind of thing, always pay attention. Keep the motion small until it gets really comfortable, until you have the ability to do it without any trouble whatsoever. Now you can also change it just a little bit. If I was to go a little wider with the arms, just a little bit. If I can do that from over here. Yep. Okay. Did it lock in? There we go. Now as she goes forward, she can kind of come across to the center. So come towards the center just a little bit. Yeah, just a little variation. Just got to be going out to position number 7 over there. She can go forward and towards the middle just a little bit. So there's a couple variations of this exercise, and I think you'll like them.